Today we've got Dave Duffy from Duffy Business Advisory or Duffy Advisory and talking about succession planning. Those that were here 12 months ago would have saw Dave talk about strategic business growth, and today he's going to talk about all the ins and outs about succession planning, what you should be considering and what to discuss with your clients. I'll hand you over to Dave.
Cool. So we're going to talk about how to help business owners see the sale as part of their succession, and I'm really going to just focus on the sale component of succession as an option, rather than talk about other aspects. But they all sort of come out of the discussion. How do I get to do this? I think most of you know me. I've got a bit of a history around town, being an accountant here in town and a business coach, and I've coached for the last 20 years pretty much exclusively. So I don't do any of the accounting or tax stuff, and there's going to be no tax in this presentation. So there's a lot of tax implications around this presentation, but we're not going to explore that. Over the last 8 years, I've sold in excess, or bought and sold in excess of $50 million worth of business. And I would suggest to you that if you actually looked at your clients and went through and made a bit of a list, you would find that you are actually quite active without you really knowing it, and how much the transactional value is in your business that you're already doing. And I think the pace we're going to talk about today is going to increase. So the agenda is, we're going to talk about what buyers are chasing and some of their tricks. We're going to talk about the state of the market, what is actually happening in the small business market. We're going to talk about enablers and who's the wolf, and then we're going to talk about the client's challenge. So I'm going to spend most of the time, the last bit here, but we're going to try and knock through some of the key elements and most of this comes from my practical experience, as well as talking to other guys in this marketplace. So the golden rule is, when you buy a business, you pay for what it's worth, not the opportunity. And I think that's the biggest trick we've got to deal with when we're talking to our clients, particularly on the buying side. The opportunity is actually going to cost them time, money, energy and resources. And you've got to be fair in what you buy when you buy the business, but too many people are going in with the big opportunity. It does actually happen with the big players, that they do come in the opportunity, and we'll talk about a couple of examples around that. But the hardest part, particularly in the SME market, the small to medium, and even particularly in the micro, is they pay way too much for what's not being offered. So both the buyer and the seller are chasing value, and it's the negotiation between the two that we're trying to meet. And particularly with buyers, the tricks is to understand what their needs and wants are, because they want to trade that off. It's not about multiplier. We're going to talk a lot about multiplier because that's the base way of valuation. But there's a whole series of things that they're after. The seller, of course, wants to get out for whatever reason, restructure their business, exit, but they're chasing that value. Multiplier is the key factor, and we're going to look at a table in a second at multiplier rates by industry. But what I've learnt is that the multiplier is affected by understanding the actual demands of the buyer. So I've sold businesses to public companies, and I've sold business and bought out on the market for small SMEs who want, larger SMEs who want to grow their footprint. And the motivation behind that, determining what they're prepared to pay, runs around understanding this. I've seen a business fall over. The deal was almost signed up, but when they actually sat down and met the employees, the cultural difference was so big that they just couldn't see how they were going to react. The value in the retraining, etc., was just going to add an extra year or two into the process. And culture can, in that case, the deal fell over. An example of where management expertise This is a key element for every large buy, and even, or anybody remote, any public company, they want the management team. So one of the problems is if you don't have the management team, you're not going to get the multiplier, because they've got to bring in and change the culture. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. Quite often they're after licenses. So I was involved in the sale to a public company of a company inside their supply chain. And that company had rights to buying groups, which they couldn't get as a public company, because when they approached the buying groups, they're saying, no, our philosophy is we do not take on public companies because we think they're too predatory in their behaviour. So they actually bought the company and paid more to get access to the licenses and the buying group. In certain cases, the licenses are held in companies by the company, and so understanding the structure of the business is really important to figure out where the value is. We did work with I sold another company to a public company who had a footprint right down the east coast and right through the centre from Brisbane to Melbourne and going across to Adelaide. So they had a gap in the Central West here, and my client knew they were looking, and we got a 7 times multiplier because this was the missing hole. Part of the advantage there was that they also got the manager, and the manager was on about $85,000, $90,000. They carried a lot of the same stock, and they actually carried some unique stock, very old stock. And so we were able to not only get a good deal, but we also got a good price for the stock and things like that. Some businesses are buying plant and equipment as well, so EBITDA does change because of the equipment they're looking for, and others are trying to buy relationships and customers. Others are trying to buy stock and position in the marketplace, and the amount of pressure that they put on understanding the stock mix in that they will pay potentially a higher multiplier based on relationships inside the business, but that will be really, really tough, and to such an extent that I've seen them where you get a value purchase of an essential part that's part of everyday sale, so they buy a large enough volume to get the discounts. Yet when they've gone through and analysed product line by product line, that product line, the particular, didn't have the stock turn, so they actually said half the stock that we've got there we don't need, and rated that as obsolete, even though it was effectively brand new. They rated the other half as valuable and paid the normal purchase price because of it, because they saw investing in stuff, even though they know they were going to have to buy it in a year or 2 years' time, there was just the excess there. And so buying patterns of previous people, previous owners, and their decisions on trying to chase discounts in the value of their stock aren't necessarily accepted by the buyer. And therefore that's been really, really hard for the owner of the business to figure out where the buyer is actually sitting. Now, if they're buying client bases and if they're buying stock or whatever, most clients have never analysed that data. They've never done a segmentation of their client base. They do not know what product penetration by broad category their clients have. They don't even keep a register of who's got long-term contracts with them. All of that's part of the due diligence that big companies want to do. Most of them don't know, particularly in stock, how to even interrogate their data. So quite often I've had to come in and actually do the data interpretation, dump the files out, and then look at the apply the formulas, and then actually figure out what is the actual stock term by item and by group, because they will come through and actually count every single thing. And to get the value, you've got to make sure you know what you do. Pressure on, in other cases, the pressure on the payback period of their investment becomes a critical decision in what their multiplier they're going to pay. Recently, a business that I was involved in selling, they had over 80% of their business on account. So the buyer was buying the books clean, so he didn't pick up the debtors or the creditors. They were retained by the seller, but with 40 employees or somewhere near that, 80% of the sales meant there was no cash flow really. It was actually a bit higher than 80. No cash flow coming in for at least 2 months. Their wages bill, they were down the hole for $4 million in the first 2 months before they actually saw a cash flow come in. So their payback pressure in what they were going to, what they wanted, they said, our cash burn's so high, plus we've got to buy the stock and plant and whatever else we're doing, we're going to put a lot of pressure on that. And the seller didn't understand the financial implications, and it took a bit of time from my perspective to actually get them to understand what the cash burn was and why there was so much pressure on. We actually packaged up some land with that, got a premium on the land. The multiplier was probably less than 3 or around less than 3. The payback was in 3 years, but that's what we had to do to make the balance work. So the trick is to understand what the motivation is, and coming in with a thing about 3 times multiplier just doesn't stand. And to give you an idea, this is put out by Groves, a brokerage firm who stimulate the market quite frequently with good material. So you can download their report, and I'm quite happy if anybody wants it, I can send you that. But this just to give you a range. Accountancy firms are still done on revenue, although there's an increasing trend to be done on EBITDA. The bottom ranges here are 2. I've seen some of them sell for lower, 1s, and depending on how important it is for the seller to get a quick sale, they're willing to take a discount. What's really interesting here, if you're in retail, and retail's a pretty tough gig these days, EBITDA plus stock, in this particular, usually in this case, I can see retail down at 1s. However, if they have an online store and it's been established, they could get an EBITDA of 6 times. And the same goes with registered training organisations. And what this doing is a reflection of the fact that they can take their IP and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and sell it out with not much cost, and particularly buying the IP of the preset courses and things like that. The stock's bought once, so the multiplier is higher, and there's very little other costs. Earth moving equipment. Here we're talking about EBITDA. Most of the time, some of these businesses don't have high EBITDAs, so it's usually around the replacement value, the purchase value of the equipment, and a small multiplier. So there is a trend. Most multipliers are inclusive of plant and equipment. Stock is outside, although I've seen this thing, we'll pay 3 times or 4 times inclusive of all the stock. And when you really look at when you think about what that is, it's come down to 1.5 or 2. I think we're going to see a fair bit of change go on in the valuations with the adoption of AI. Businesses that are not seen to be moving forward and looking at automation or robotics or the use of AI to improve systems and things like that, And one of the guys we talked to yesterday in one of the law firms, he said it's really changing what's going in law firms. If you're not got a business that's on the uptake now, I think your valuations are going to fall. Would you agree? We're right at the early stages of it, but I think it's going to have a pretty big change. And the AI we have now is the worst it's ever going to be. It's only keep going. So it's key, therefore, to understand what the drivers are. And unfortunately, I see a lot of in the micro business and even in some of the smaller businesses, I see a lot of people buying a job. All right? And unfortunately, EBITDA becomes really important, and most of our clients don't understand what EBITDA is and don't know how to talk about it. So the problem, so that's any comments about buyers, any trends that you've got or seen?
So when you mentioned, well, buyers don't understand EBITDA, you doing like they don't understand what a number means or what it actually represents in the business?
We've got to get it to be the actual EBITDA,
yeah.
Right? And I quite often see numbers where people have never put an appropriate rental on their property. Right? So they're saying, my EBITDA is great. And I said, but where's the rent? That's not a commercial rent. Now, if their super funds owns it, under the super fund requirements, they've got to be audited and have an independent valuation. There's a better chance it's more likely to be there. But it's amazing the number of times that it's just not even on the sheet. Or their wage, right? Their commercial wage. So they don't actually understand their economic model.
David, just with, you used a word there a while ago of opportunity. Most of the people that I see or want to buy a business, they use the word potential. But potential costs money.
Yeah, well, opportunity and potential are the same to me. You don't pay for it. It's got to fit within your business model, but you've got to pay what it's worth. You know.
Yeah, that's what some of them don't understand.
Yeah, that's right.
Buyers,
yeah. So we're talking the same language, perhaps just different words. The problem we see in the marketplace, and I'll ask this, and this will be a question, we have yet to get a response to this. Does anybody know of a brokerage firm, business brokerage firm, that they would recommend? Apart from industry specialists. Okay. Here lies the biggest problem. This is the 5th workshop we've done, and not one accounting or professional or legal firm has been able to recommend a brokerage company for us to use. I am aware that an accounting practice has actually set up a business brokerage unit in their business because they've got to find a credible thing. There are plenty of places where you can find business listed, but the preparation of getting people ready to sell and getting their data in an appropriate thing is missing, right? So they are the wolf. And in smaller businesses, and we've been playing around the number, for under $500,000, they're looking at 25% plus commission plus your advertising costs. And if they're not moving, that advertising cost keeps stripping out. And then they seem to go cold. Very good at doing the buy, very bad at actually doing the conversion sale process. A lot of businesses that are listed are actually listed through real estate agents. And once again, the financial statements that they produce have been terrible. There is no analysis of the client base or the stock or the equipment, or nothing done on the legal structures that are involved. So it's a real problem. It's a real opportunity for professional service firms to get people's records, including their stock and everything else, organised, or their client history or their segmentation. There's a lot of work in that, but that's what you're trying to sell to get the better multiplier. So in understanding our client and markets, our next focus, we first need to understand what the seller looks like. Now, unfortunately, he's probably a little bit older than most of our target market, but it was the photo that I could grab that was appropriate for today. So let's just understand what the profile of a private business owner is, right? They're more optimistic than a risk taker. So they'll take a risk conservatively. So they see the market better than it perhaps really is. Emotion drives lots of their decisions. They're ruggedly independent. Don't tell me, and I think we've all been there, don't tell me about what's going on in my business you don't really understand. Right? I've got 20 or 30 years experience. My business is worth this. I know exactly what it is, and I want $1 million or $2 million or whatever the number is without any real basis. They define their own success. So what we might determine financially or whatever else is success, they'll have their own metrics. The interaction with their customer or their delivery of their technical skill gives them their oxygen, and so therefore they don't see when they're coming towards the end of their business life. Strategy emerges incrementally. They don't often have a plan. They see an opportunity, then that thinks about, oh, well, I need a new piece of equipment, then I need to do this, and then that might lead to something. But they wouldn't swap it for quids unless they've got some incident that happened in their life which has made them reassess their future. These are, the next couple of slides are pretty recent stats. Come from small business, from Family Business Australia, and another number of other places. So the medium age is now well over 50, with 22% now over 60. So it's quite a large amount. Now that number in 2006 was the average age was 42 or 44 or something like that. So we are definitely moving through that aging process, and it shows you the churn has not been as efficient to keep young people in business. Most CEOs want to retire in their late 50s and out by 60, 73%. The failure rate in succession in business sales is 70%. Can anybody tell me why? Got 4 letters, starts with P. Planning. There's none. There's a great failure in planning, and unfortunately they come into you and say, I want to sell my business, I've got somebody there, you know, what do you think? They don't engage people early enough. And to actually get them ready to sell, it's a minimum of 2 to 5. Right? And I think this is where there's a lot of opportunity. We'll talk a bit more about it in a sec. 38% want to pass their businesses on to their next generation. So this is not just agriculture. So we tend to think that businesses, small businesses and medium-sized businesses don't pass down the generations. That's not true. One of my longest engagements with a client, 11 or 12 years or something like that, I no longer work there because 3 of their children, they only have 3, all decided to come back and work in the family business. And so now they're in the process of being trained by mum and dad. Mum's come back into the business, well, never was in the business, come into the business to do the HR side, and they're actually learning each of the different elements of that business. There are 7 business units, 4 locations in that family company. So there's plenty of scope. I'm not sure what Dad's going to do when they just say, hey, Dad, you're out. But he's really enthused by that. 9% don't have a structured family meeting, so they never talk about succession or where the business is going or where their future is. And whilst down here we've got 30% say they've got a succession plan in place, up here we say 2/3 of them don't. I tend to think it's more like this: 83% still don't have a succession plan, which is in writing, which is clearly communicated, which is actually driving their decision making. So they might have a plan, but actually, is anybody keeping them accountable to it? Well, that's a completely different story. The stats are basically 1 out of every 2 private businesses is going to sell in the next 10 years. And I can already see it. I think you could see it. You could feel it. It's already happening in the marketplace. There are lots of businesses that are just churning at the moment, or starting to churn. And I think, unfortunately, you're seeing people lose value or closing businesses without actually thinking about what's going on. So let's have a look at what that means to our region. And I put this table up last year. And what we're going to do is we're going to ignore businesses underneath $200,000 turnover and concentrate on the numbers over here. But in Bathurst region, there's 6,400 business. Let's just halve the number. So there's 3,200 businesses in the next 10 years that are likely to churn, right? Or half of those we're going to churn. In orange, there's another 6,600. So if we halve that, 3,2 plus 3,3, we're up to 6,5. And if we then come to Dubbo, where we've got 13,000 businesses, because we're a larger service region, let's halve that. So let's make that 6.5. So we're now looking at nearly 13,000 businesses in our region that are going to sell. No, half of those are going to sell. 7,500 businesses over the next 10 years are going to change hands. So it's a really big number, and the pace is going to actually increase.
David, that piranha, does that stretch all the way up to like Perth, Cobar?
Look, I honestly can't remember, but it doesn't take into account far west, right? So it's more our area, Forbes Parks, Parks, not Forbes, Gilgandra, Mudgee, I think, falls into these numbers as well. So it was geographically based when I actually looked at the numbers. Okay, so this is our client. He's a chameleon. He's going to change colours and spots over the next few years. And currently, I think if you ask most of your late 50s, early 60s business owners, ask them how they're feeling, they'd be going, I'm fine, got years left in me, right? Because they're really engaged in where they're going. And what we've got to do is we've got to change their spots and colours to actually get them to think about what the future might really look for them like. And the biggest thing is we've got to change their mindset. This is the Change Success Model. It was developed by a fellow by the name of Dr. Chris Mason through the Mindshop Group. When he did his PhD, he went out and looked at what was the contributing factors for change, and then he developed this model, which has been tested internationally. And basically, to get an effective change, you got to change your beliefs, your readiness, and your capability. You've got to basically get a score greater than 74. If it's under 74, the likelihood of change is dramatically reduced. Most of our clients who got businesses don't actually see a need for change. It's not going to happen to me just yet. So their mindset is nowhere near thinking about their future. Their self-confidence is about what they do now, not about where they're going to be in the future. And their perceived difficulties, it'll be easy to sell or whatever, but it's an unrealistic basis. They've got no vision of what the future is going to look like because they're so caught up in their business and the business is in their face day in, day out. So our job is to actually help them change those things, and it's really around mindset and belief that we've really got to do some work with them. And until we get that, we can't even work on the plan because they don't see any need for it. To achieve that, I've got a whole range of stuff, and you can develop these as well. I develop a series of diagnostics, and quite literally I go into ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, tell me the 10 key factors that are affecting a manufacturer in steel fabrication for rural plant and equipment. What are the 10 key factors that will affect their success? And then it'll give me a ranking, and I'll pick, or maybe I even ask for more, and then bring it down to the top 10 as I think. And then I said, give me 3 questions that I can ask that will make them think about how good that part of their business is, and then build a diagnostic. And all I'm trying to do is get them to see that to sell a business there are lots of different components, and we need to build the capacity, because people are going to buy this. The serious money that's going to give you real value is about how good your systems, your processes, your management, when you're not there, that this business ticks over without you being there. And so we need leverage points to get them to look at every different aspect of their business. Because they're after money. When it really comes down to it, when our clients come and finally talk to us about wanting to change, they're after something to pay for it in their retirement. So changing the mindset is really, really difficult, and strategic questions are really helpful at doing that, and we've got a couple of slides around those. But what does your future look like? Can you draw me a picture? Right. Yeah. Are you already approaching the window? No. Yeah. Would you like to play more golf? Yes. Are you approaching the window? No. They're not really looking at the things. Want to spend more time fishing? Yes. Whatever it might be. How important is the sale? How urgent is it? Or is it part of your succession? Have you actually thought about it? 38% want to pass it on to their family. Have they actually talked to them? Have they actually built the skills of their children to actually take over the business? No, often. What could change? What would affect you? Oh, my back's been sore, or whatever else, or I just can't do the stuff. I was talking to a young tradie, second generation business, multi-million-dollar turnover. He says, I just can't do it on the tools as good as I used to. We need young people in the business, and he's late 40s. So he's not even at the stage where this is in the thing, but he can already see what's going to happen, what the impact of his business is going to be. What would you like to change? This is a really great question. What would you have to change to make your business better? That's quite exposing for many of them. So what we're really trying to do is do a health check on their business, and looking at what are the success factors or succession factors that's going to lead to a successful sale. And so we can drive them forward. And these are more strategic questions. Have you optimised your profit? No. Are you operating strongly? No. Are you growing? If your business is not growing, buyers want to see 3 years worth of financials. If your 3 years worth of financials are stagnant, you might have done something to tweak your EBIT, but if there's no growth in the business, then what are they buying? They're not going to pay a strong multiplier. Is your business attractive? Quite often you go into some of the business and they're ready for sale because you can actually see the dust or stock that hasn't been moved, or things that haven't been moved around the manufacturing plant, or heaps of rubbish that are sitting there. They're just nowhere near the ready for sale thing. How long can you stay on the triple O thing? From one emergency to the next emergency, the next emergency. Have you cleaned out all your books? Are you on the straight and narrow? Don't talk about selling cash. You can't sell cash. Is it in the books? Have you got the structures clean? Right? Of course, there's a tendency for SMEs to buy SMEs just to buy the company out because they want to take the risks that might be sitting in a company structure, but they might have multiple structures. Something in trust, something else is in a company, something else is in a private person's name, and they're not really consolidated from an ownership point of view. They've never done a review of the legal contracts in their business, because that's part of the due diligence that you can get caught on. Operation strong. Is your house ready? If you sell a business, what are you going to do? What do you want to do? They're talking about, I want to go to the coast and all the rest. You've done this bit. And is your business ready? The answer is no. Most businesses, most SMEs are carrying too much. They're not paying enough wages to themselves. They're driving cars that aren't really part of the sale process. They've got personal and family expenses sitting in their books that need to be stripped out. And you can't just strip them out in 1 year. They end up paying more tax because of this, but you can't strip them out in 1 year because people want to look at 3 years worth of financial data to show that there's growth in the return. So basically I can't see how a business can be ready unless you've been working with them for some time in this set under a 3-year period. And so what we do is develop a business checklist so we can look at the outputs as they're moving through the progression of that. That's a little bit more complicated, but I always get down to a rating on certain elements of their business. And then I've got to help them define what the success is. And what we do with that model here, by the way, is we use this and just update it as we go forward. And I'm going to show you a different way of doing the same thing. But we've got to define success. To them in this process, remember, business owners define their own success. So they may be more happy to sell and transfer the business onto their children than get a high EBITDA. Or not even settle for anything related to a multiplier. Yet I know I've seen some of the most ruthless deals done where dad says, I am not giving this business away and I want top dollar. So you've got to understand the motivation. Success is something you've got to be clear about where they're trying to go to. And then you've got to figure out a transition phase, which is what we're going to talk about a bit in a moment. And so succession is about understanding the time available that we've got, what's the value we're trying to chase, what's the transition approach, what's the owner got to do himself, and where is he going to go to afterwards. And each one of these 5 phases, and this came out of a mate of mine who presented at a conference recently, and I said, I just love that. It's all the things I do, but I hadn't seen it just graphically put out like this, and I said, can I steal it and present it to you guys? And he said, yeah. So one of the things about timing, and this, once again, it's about this visual presentation, having dashboards about how fast we are moving through and changing the nature of business and putting ratings on it. It's making it clear to them. But this is a really simple thing. Tell me now, so how old are you? I'm 58 or 55. Okay. In 5 years' time, you'd like to sell your business or be capable of selling your business? Yeah, okay. Well, you're going to be 60 or 7 years, 62, whatever it's going to be. Tell me how well's your health now? Oh, I'm great. I'm really, I wouldn't want to change anything I do. I could do this for years, but you want to sell. But when you're 62, you think you're going to be in the same condition? I'd like to be, but you're probably right. There are probably health issues that are going to start to creep in. And particularly in labour-intensive businesses or a lot of driving or farming, or, something where there's a lot of physical impact. What's your business value? And we can all do a quick EBITDA and just play a base model value to give them some sort of idea. Usually it's nowhere. 1 to 3, we're moving, taking out stuff, reorganising it. Then we've got to get in the right phase. We've also this has got to be based around growing. What are the market conditions like? Well, at the moment, if you're supplying agriculture, we're in this green thing, but we all know a drought will come. How will that impact on your ability to sell your business We've been having longer droughts, not shorter droughts. So how quickly can we get this business into condition and position it so it's attractive to the market? What are the threats in the market? At the moment, there's a huge amount of consolidations going down on every sort of business. Optometry, legal practices, accountancy's been going on for ages, hardware businesses, you could just about go through, even motor mechanics. There are starting to be consolidators in those markets. So what are the threats? What do they bring? They usually bring new technology, new energy, new innovation, new buying systems. They're going to adopt the early adoption of AI and other things, and robotics. There's lots of threats out there. Readiness. How ready is your staff? Who's going to lead this business when you're not in charge? Who's going to take over the sales process that you currently run? You hold all the relationships with the clients because the business started with you. So what do we have to do to transition the readiness of the business? And then down the bottom, what's our window look like? If I look up the things, really I'm in a red state because I'm not ready. I certainly haven't got my value there, even though I might have energy and all the rest of it. And look, it's a funny thing, but the more visual you can make it, the more you can put a colour to it, the easier it is for them to see the picture. Like the story I've been telling is that in talking about timing, a picture that one of my clients drew, his wife drew, was a stick person. It was there was this. There was a line like this with two legs on the bottom of it. There was a palm tree, and then there was the wave. Then there was a stick person sitting up there with a brim hat, a hand up with a champagne glass drawn in there. So her picture of what was going to be the end game, that business was a local business here in Dubbo. It sold very well. The people who bought it killed it. It was a conglomerate, and the business has now been reacquired by smaller players and regrowing. But there, I know exactly where she is. She's sitting on the coast. That vision was so clear about where they were going. So in creating this picture, there's other ways of creating other pictures that are going to motivate them. So transition, I think, is minimum 2 to 5. And they're not ready to talk about it yet, but we've got to actually help change that mindset. We've then got to figure out what the value gap is. So if the aim is I want to sit there with 4 million and I'm currently got an EBITDA of 1 million, it'd be lovely to see businesses like this, they are out there, then we might find that a 3 times 4 multiplier is going to give us a value about here, but we've got to pay tax. This is the number I'm after. So this allows me to actually identify that to get a $5 million target based on EBITDA, I've got to grow my EBIT. If I can get a 4 times multiplier, not a 3 times multiplier, now get the 4 times multiplier, I've got to have an EBITDA of 1.25. Right? How am I going to do that? That sets them up. This is where they're talking to you about tax and all the rest, and there's going to be tax consequences all the way through. If we have to strip parts of the business that are not really being shown out of their books, or we have to substitute in commercial rents for the premises that they're hoping to either retain on sale or sell as a separate business asset, then we've got to get those numbers realistic in their heads. Right? Now, you may not physically pay the rent, although it's a good discipline, because that money then goes into their super or their other savings, but they're quite often not running business models that are economically valuable to a buyer. And it's a real challenge in getting that I had a cafe in a strategic location with a very high turnover, and they came in and they said, you know, can you help us? What do you think our business is worth? And I said, show me the rent. Where's the rent? Oh, we own the building. But you can't have that EBIT and expect people to pay the money you just asked, you told me you thought you were going to get when you don't have any rent. And they went, what do you mean? I said, you don't understand what you're selling. Because you want to retain that building, and you're now telling me you're going to put tenants upstairs in the building as well to get issues. How is that going to affect the business owner? Right? The business is going to sell. They walked away. They still own the business. I'm not sure that they actually got it. But they've not got something that was saleable. Not to the expectations they had. And I've actually seen that a couple of times where people, once they realise their value is not there, have just said, oh, well, I'll just keep working it and close it. Because they're not prepared to grow the business. And doing budgets and plans and that around growing businesses, you can't say just put up your, well, we're going to grow your sales by 10%. Some of it you can do by price, but what's the strategy to grow it by 10%? They don't have it. Right? It's great for us to say it as an accountant, hey, this is a number, but we've got to actually talk about how they're physically going to actually, what activities they're going to change in their business to achieve it. So once the value is done, then we've got to figure out the transition phase. And this is really interesting. I think most of the time we know who's going to buy your business. We just have to create a database around collecting the names of potentials. If you're in an industry where a trade sale is the most likely person to buy your business, this is really easy. And you can look at who is in that trade area that you can do. Right? There are maybe employees that are potential rising stars that we should be selling the business to. There may be family members. We know 38% want to sell it to a family member. It could be an existing partner. It could be a future partner. Somebody's going to come in through an acquisition or a merger, or somebody that comes in that you know is a really dynamic person. Once they come into your business, is going to make a dramatic change. Right? You can do merger, strategic buy, a third party that's outside the region or whatever else. It's somebody in the supply chain that might find you valuable in their process, or you can go to the top end and look at listing. And I actually, about 8 years ago, had a client who moved towards listing, and certainly it was the Mars story, moving to grow their business to move to a listing. Right, once we've done that, we can go through and pretty quickly start knocking out what's the likelihood of those people, and we can put some, make a decision matrix about how easy, have they got the financial capability, have they got the experience, etc., and that helps you cut that list down, and then that helps you figure out where your potential target is. And a business I sold, we knew it was going to be a trade sale because of the size and the nature of the business. It was a very big business. It took us 10 years to find the right trade buyer. And then the moment we found one, we found three. And we had three people all bidding at the same time, which was really helpful. And they didn't take the top money. So they actually walked away from money in that case because their success was determined by somebody who they thought would honour their staff and their customers. And some of the other guys' business models just didn't fit with what they measured as success. It was a very big sale though. So once we've got to do that, we've now got to move to the thing is what's their contribution, right? He's got to train his people, and whether that's his kids or somebody in the staff, because he's no longer in the business. And I say he, respectfully, there are a number of women who have got very successful businesses, and there are lots of husband and wife businesses, but usually the key driver we're seeing is the male member in the business. So I don't want to say that women aren't involved in this. at all. And they're probably they're better at looking at this picture than what we've done with the guys, because they have a better way of looking at the balance of life, whereas men manage what we do by what we do. What we're worth by what we do, I should say. I'm willing to stay on in directors in over 3 to 5. 2 to 3 years, I've got to be scaling back. I'm going to be doing 75% of what I'm doing. I've got to have the golf. I've got to be away from the business. Can you tell me why?
Otherwise you'll never leave.
They'll never leave, that's right. They won't lose control. Right? You've got to get them back out of the system. You've got to start them in that transition phase well before the sale of the business. Go on a holiday. Go on a long holiday. Right? Give this younger team the opportunity to buy, to run your business, because that's what somebody else is buying. Right? So in this case, using this example, he was the relationship. Every client there was his client. He's done it over 30 or 40 years. So he has to build up a sales rep. He has to build up a system and resources. He's got to get the reputation of them as a key player in the market out there. He's got to identify who the key staff are and how they're going to grow the business. He's got to actually align the key clients with key staff. Right? So that means profiling, classifying A, B, C, D, the clients in your client base. Look at who actually generates your profits. 20% of your clients generate 80% of your profit. The next category, your C-class clients, represent about 80%, not 80, but probably 60% of your turnover, and they basically just cover costs. They're actually not where you make your money, and your D-class clients, you shouldn't have them. So there's a fair bit of restructure that you can do in that time frame. So now we've figured out that before, who we're going to sell to, who the third party is. We've now figured out what he's got to do, and last, we've got to talk to them about what is retirement, or what does it look like. And once again, this is a pretty simple model, but it's really powerful because it breaks down something that they haven't really thought about. What's their purpose? Live, love, laugh, travel, see the world, whatever it is, right? But the purpose is really to live life, to hopefully be in love with somebody and do a lot of laughing, right? And you can add extras on there, but it pretty gets down to these pretty simple things. And you've got to try and keep it simple. Don't want to be too complicated. What roles are they going to have? Well, partner, spouse, grandparent, friend, mentor, philanthropist. You know, what roles can they see themselves doing? Relationships, their family, their golf mates, or whatever it might be, old industry contacts, lots of local clubs, whatever it might be. What activities they're going to do? They might start up a mentoring program or an industry association. And there's quite a lot of executives and business owners who are doing mentoring. They just don't recognise it as something they're doing. Some of them do it actually at a fee. A lot of them do it for nix. Getting on non-for-profits. And then you've got to talk about wealth. That 4 million, what are they going to do? How are they actually going to manage it? Are they active managers or are they a passive manager? And I used to be an active manager. I used to have a very active share portfolio. Now I'm slack. I've got to rechange. So what are you going to do? Who's going to be your broker? Who's going to be your advisor? Who's going to do this? Who's going to be that? Right? Because what they used to be is either not going to be that, but if it's going to be something new, we've got to help them figure out what that is and how they're going to do it. And so we then move them through this process. Once again, you can see it's quite a lengthy process. There's a lot of engagement required in that. And then when you look at together, this is Bob the Builder's succession plan. It's relatively simple in concept. There's a lot of work to be done there. There are lots of players involved. I find it in the business sales that I've been involved in, or acquisitions, it's been, you know, a 3 or 4 head beast, including the client. So we're actively using their accountant, an external advisor who may know stuff about the market or valuation of equipment or something like that. Myself, definitely the solicitors and making sure legal structures are right and contracts are there, and wills are appropriately established, and the risk side of things, and then finance. So, you know, it's a multidisciplinary process if you really want to get the success that you're driving. And sometimes we have to wear a number of those heads for the client. In summary, 1 out of 2 businesses in the next 10 years are either going to close, be sold for nothing, 38% of them are going to go to a next generation, hopefully, and the rest are going to be sold actively in the marketplace for what we hope is real value. The biggest issue they've got is they need you, right? I'm an advisor. No matter how good I am, they will still go, let's go and talk to our accountant and solicitor about this as they're going. And so therefore, for me, it's always been a partnership, working a way through. Changing mindset, belief, you've got to work on this all the way through the process, because they don't see the process. They don't have somebody come up and pat them on the back for the changes they've made, or tell them, and I've told this story before, but when I work with, I surveyed my clients 7 years ago now, and I said, what do they want to pay me for? Number one thing they want to pay me for is accountability. They want somebody to keep them accountable to the processes that they want to do, because they're doing this. They're fighting battles day in, day out with their customers, their employees, the marketplace and everything else. Secondly, they want focus and clarity. Where are we going, and the clarity of what I should be doing now. What are the key important things to do at this time? They want support. Who do they talk to? And they need skill development, because they are often quite good technicians but not very good businessmen. And if they want a good EBITDA, then we're going to have to step in. And so therefore, most of my engagements, all my engagements are on a fixed fee basis, paid monthly. Occasionally there are spikes where we have to do a bit more work, and I'll pre-agree the fee. But I'm into that arrangement with them because I've got to make them change. Assess their preparedness all the way through the process. Bumps come along, people get sick, competitors open, COVID happens, or market trend dies, or interest rates do, change of government stops businesses for 4 months. Don't ask me why that happens, and you've got to help them see the whole board. Questions, comments? What do you think?
So how do you get over the problem that everyone's facing now? It doesn't matter what business I walk into, they all tell me the same thing: staff. Staff do not want to work, they can't get staff.
That's just one issue. One of the problems is some of them are not creating the right culture, some aren't hunting in the right parks, and they're not retaining the people that they should retain. Staff is an issue. Why should I invest in training them? It's quite often what I hear, because they're not going to stay. All I'm doing is training somebody to go in to work for somebody else. Guess what? You get the people that you want. Not many people actually selectively go out and hunt good people. Yet there are businesses in this town where the 16-year-olds and the 17-year-olds are picking the kids that are going to work with them, because they know those kids have got the capability to do it, right? The kids control. They don't want to employ somebody that they know is a slacker or doesn't share the same values, and they'll weed them out before you will. So it's it's that some businesses don't have retention models. They don't think about what they need to retain. They're not investing in their staff, and they're not paying them the money they should. And this is an example where they do not have a viable economic model. Because somebody comes in and buys their business and goes through and say, holy hell, how the hell are they paying these? We can't do that. In our corporate environment, we just can't do. All of a sudden, everybody's salary goes up $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, and there's no training budget in there. That all comes out of their calculation EBITDA. And why would anybody want to come work for you? You know, I've got an engineer I work with, lost a staff member because his relationship broke down, went down the road. 2 new people walked through the door because his staff went out and asked other people in the marketplace. He's still got the sign out the front and still advertising on 1 employees, but 2 new people walked in who are highly productive because the people in his business realised who they needed. Can I just offer a couple of things? There's some simple things to do. From a perspective of what happens, I think strategic questioning is, you must have a capacity to ask strategic questioning. ChatGPT, let's go there. I've got a meeting coming up. I'm going to talk to a client that's got difficulty around seeing this. What's some strategic questions I could ask to help him bring this? So let's cheat, right? Let's use the technology to help us. Second thing is, list out all your clients' businesses and put their age next to them. That'll pretty quickly tell you how many businesses that you've got are in the succession planning phase. Now, agriculture is got exactly the same pressures, but they tend to take a little bit longer. Business owners want to get out, right? Both of them have got attributes in here. I'm just talking about the sale component of their businesses. I'm not talking about the rest of their succession. It's a big-headed beast here. There are lots of people that you've got that are professionals who won't be selling their businesses. Their succession is more about their retirement. This is different focus. But Andrew asked me, do I get paid a success fee? You know, I've used business brokerage to buy clients and things like that. Normally I just set a fee. I then talk to them, if we do this successfully, you know, instead of paying 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10%, I might say to them at the end, is it okay that if we achieve the sale factor, that there's a bonus in fact in there, right? Now, yes, I like to share in the reward. Yes, they're usually very generous in wanting to share that. But they've got to be in the game. I will not work for anybody who wants you, well, if you sell it, we'll give you a certain commission base. That's not the motivation. They've got to have skin in the game to change their business, to own the businesses, and they need regular contact. Most of the businesses I coach now, I never see anybody on a 3-monthly basis. It must be a minimum of 1 month. I must see them every month for at least a half a day or a couple of hours, but majority I see once a week, 15 to 20 minutes every week, right? And that's just to keep them on track. And so Mondays is usually my day where I'm allocated to talk to every one of my clients that I'm on a coaching engagement with about what they're doing. And a simple question, all done electronically beforehand using Google Docs or Microsoft Documents. On Friday, with a reminder, what were the 3 things you did this week that led you towards last week, that led you towards your goals? What are the barriers you see you're going to come across this week? What were the 3 things you're going to do this week to achieve the goal to move towards the... And I work on a very simple 90-day plan. And most plans now are done in, you know, dot point, you know, 2 or 3 pages. You might have to create other plans behind it, but they're pretty simple. I'm after a 1-page summary. The 2nd page, the 3rd page is just the other additional steps that might come in behind it. And quite often the message for the week is, I'm going to ring the bank and organise to do a review of our finances. right? The action is, the strategy is ring review finance. Action is ring Kevin Tuesday 10 a.m. It's got to be that precise, because you say, did you ring Kevin on 10 a.m.? No, I forgot all about it. Okay, you want to make change. What's the actual steps you're going to take? So sometimes it has to be really, really focused. Other times you can be a bit more broad brush. Right? This is part of the growth series that Roger Reedy is doing. We're trying to find ways. We all know you accountants and others are busy with your businesses, but you are the trusted advisors. There is a huge amount of work coming our way in this area, and my role, I'm happy to come and present this sort of stuff and talk about these concepts to your clients for you, so you can actually spend time there, and I'll get you to showcase different aspects of your business if you want. I've been coaching businesses for over 20 years. Most of my clients have come from other practices, not out of the accounting practices I've worked with, so I'm very used to working non-competitively. I no longer have an interest in any accounting practices. And if I do find a problem with your client and they're dissatisfied with your service, you'll hear about it first. I will be sending them back to you to say, okay, we've got something wrong with the relationship, because it's such a critical relationship for their business and their success, right? And I don't know how close I can get to clients. In the end, they say, I need to go and talk to my accountant about this. I need to talk about the tax implications. And therefore, I tend to find a lot of work for you guys as I go through this process, because I'm at the grunt level with them, as well as because I'm keeping them accountable with the stuff that they should be doing.